David Lynch's Blue Velvet. I mean, it's one of those films that just gets under your skin, right? It's bizarre, it's unsettling, and it is notoriously hard to pin down. So today, we're going to dive into a really fascinating piece by Lesley Stern that doesn't just try to interpret the film, but kind of blows up the whole idea of interpretation itself. It's an analysis that asks us, how do we even begin to make sense of something so completely chaotic? Let's get into it.
And that's really the central problem, isn't it? Trying to analyze Blue Velvet is like trying to write down a dream the moment you wake up. It's all fragments, the logic is, well, it's dream logic, and it leaves you feeling deeply weird. So how can our usual tools of film criticism even start to get a grip on something so slippery?
So Stern's first move is to frame the film not as a story, but as a perverse text. Now, think about that for a second. It's a text that actively fights back against being understood. It is full of holes, contradictions, and these little broken pieces that just refuse to add up to a nice, clean picture.
To navigate this thing, we're going to need a guide, and that's Lesley Stern. Now, what's so cool here is how she introduces herself. See, she's writing for a bunch of psychoanalysts, so she takes on this persona of an outsider. She's a plain Jane, a bluestocking. She's the academic who's stepping into their territory.
And she builds her entire argument around this incredible line from the Hitchcock movie Marnie, "You Freud, me Jane." That one question just perfectly nails the power dynamic she wants to dig into. Who's the expert here? Who is the civilized analyst with all the answers? And who is the wild subject that needs to be figured out?
And this lays out that tension perfectly. On one side, you have the law of the jungle, the absolute chaos, the primal, untamed world of the film itself. And on the other, you have the law of the father, the structured, authoritative, rule-bound world of psychoanalysis. Stern is planting her flag right on that thin, dangerous line between them.
So her solution is to use this really powerful metaphor. To understand Blue Velvet, she says, the critic has to treat it like a jungle. You can't just analyze it from a safe academic distance. Nope. You have to actually venture into its wild, unpredictable, and frankly, dangerous territory.
And to survive in this jungle, she proposes an alliance, a kind of blurring of identities. She says, okay, for this analysis to work, let's just equate Freud with Jane. Let's say the psychoanalyst is the academic critic. And, most importantly, let's treat the fragmented story a patient tells their shrink as the same thing as the fragmented story of this film.
Which of course brings us to the million-dollar question. If you're wading through a jungle, your usual city map isn't going to help you. So what kind of critical method can actually work in this kind of wild, messy landscape?
Her answer is to embrace this idea called wild analysis. Now, this term, it was originally an insult in psychoanalytic circles. It was used to describe an analyst who's just jumping to conclusions, offering these half-baked interpretations that were probably more about their own stuff than the patient's.
But Stern just flips this whole idea on its head. She argues that for a text like Blue Velvet, a film that is already broken, that's already irrational and has no logical center, a wild approach isn't a mistake. It's the perfect tool for the job. You have to meet the chaos with a little chaos of your own.
And I just love this phrase she uses, gossamer omnipotence. She uses it to say that any critic trying to force one single all-knowing meaning onto this movie is just on an ego trip. It's pretending you have this godlike power over the text, which is a complete fantasy when you're dealing with something this, well, perverse.
So what does this wild method actually look like in practice? Well, the rules are basically the opposite of what you'd expect. First, you have to completely abandon the search for a single, coherent meaning. Second, you lean into free association, just letting your mind make connections. And third, you have to privilege the fragments, the little pieces, those specific, unsettling images that psychoanalysts call part objects.
And in Blue Velvet, a movie that is just littered with these disturbing fragments, there is one part object that stands out above all the rest, and it becomes the anchor for her entire free associative analysis.
Yep, the severed ear. I mean, of course it is, right? It's the first major crack in reality. It's the thing that pulls us from that perfect suburban lawn right into the dark, violent underworld. For Stern, this is ground zero. This is where the journey into the jungle begins.
Okay, so we've got our jungle, we've got our method, we're all set, right? Not so fast, because just when you think you've got it all figured out, Stern introduces this absolutely brilliant twist. She goes back and messes with that first simple idea, you Freud, me Jane. To get this twist, we got to go back to that jungle metaphor. We usually think of Jane as the one who needs rescuing, right? But Stern reminds us, wait a minute, in the actual story, Jane is the one who teaches Tarzan language. She brings civilization to him.
She's not just a passive subject, she actually holds the power.
And here she draws this fascinating parallel. She points out that historically, it was the so-called enigma of femininity that pushed Freud to develop huge parts of his psychoanalytic theory. The feminine wasn't just this passive thing to be studied, it was the active catalyst that created the theory.
So what does all this mean? It means that initial alliance she proposed, that whole Jane and Freud team-up, it's not a peaceful partnership at all. Stern reveals that it's actually a site of conflict. It's a power struggle between the role of Jane, the critic, and Freud, the analyst.
And this, right here, is the absolute core of her entire argument. The struggle isn't just some abstract academic debate. It is specifically about the sexual identity of the analyst. It's about what happens when a female critic, a Jane, dares to take on the traditionally male-coded role of the all-knowing analyst, the Freud.
And Stern puts it right out there. Her choice to keep calling the analyst she throughout her paper isn't an accident. It's a deliberate tactical move. She does it, in her own words, to indicate a drama central to the transference, that's that intense emotional relationship and analysis, involved in analyzing Blue Velvet. It's her way of forcing us to look at the tension over gender and authority that's happening in the very act of criticism.
Which leaves us with this final, really provocative question. Stern's analysis suggests that maybe the deepest mystery in this whole thing isn't the severed ear, or the darkness hiding in Lumberton. What if the real enigma, the thing we really need to be analyzing, is the identity, the position, and the power of the person doing the analyzing in the first place?